Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we are tackling one of those completely mind-bending, late-night, existential topics. But we're doing it with a bit of a twist. Today we're taking some seriously dense, cutting-edge academic philosophy and translating it into a highly practical guide for living in a simulated world. We're looking at the work of Benoit Lapierre and his framework on the simulation hypothesis. If you've ever felt totally overwhelmed by the idea that nothing around you is real, well, you're in the exact right place. We are going to completely flip that anxiety right on its head. So, are we living in a simulation? I mean, it's the classic pop culture question, right? It's the fundamental premise of movies like The Matrix and pretty much endless speculative debates on the internet. And usually when we start pulling at this thread, this wild idea that our entire universe, our memories, even our physical bodies might just be computational hardware and code, it triggers this paralyzing existential vertigo. The ground just completely falls out from under us. Because if it's all just a sophisticated computer program run by some unseen intelligence, does anything we do actually matter?
Okay, let's dive right into this, because this is where the conversation usually just splits into two totally distinct reactions. On one side, we have the nihilist view. This is that despairing reaction. Nothing matters because it's all fake, it's just an illusion. But the source material introduces us to a much more powerful alternative, the pragmatic view. This stance bluntly asks, who cares? And not out of ignorance, but out of a really profound realization. If the experience is consistent, the experience is literally all that matters. This explainer is all about that core conflict between giving up and radically embracing the reality of our experiences, completely regardless of what they're actually made of.
To get us there, we've got a really fascinating roadmap today. We'll be covering, are we in a simulation? The pragmatic wall, coding the mind, hacking the system's power, our tokenized future, and finally, engineering better realities. Let's jump in.
Section 1. Are we in a simulation? The existential vertigo.
Section 2. The pragmatic wall, phenomenological equivalence.
And that actually brings us to an absolutely crucial concept, phenomenological equivalence. I know, it's a total mouthful, but the definition breaks it down perfectly. It's the principle that if a simulation is so well done that it's indistinguishable from base reality, well, then the subjective experience is the only metric that holds any value. Let me unpack this with a great analogy from the text. Think of a stubbed toe. Whether the excitation of that stubbed toe originates from physical colliding carbon atoms or from colliding digital bits of code, the pain demands the exact same psychological response. It hurts exactly the same. The origin of the stimuli doesn't change the reality of the experience, which leads us to this brilliantly blunt quote from the research. The rent is still due. I love this because it grounds all this high-level philosophy right back down into our everyday lives. Even if you magically discover the universe is a digital construct, that knowledge doesn't give you some cheat code to bypass the rules of the server. Your body still gets hungry, your actions still have very real consequences, and yes, your landlord, or the system's algorithm, still expects payment. The internal law of consequence remains entirely binding. And this brilliantly illustrates how we can practically map all of this out. The author triangulates 5 major academic domains to show how we navigate this system. Psychoanalysis tells us reality is a defense mechanism, so we have to maintain psychological stability. Deconstruction tells us there is no original reality, so focus on the coherence of your current life. Theolopolitics views the divine as the system's code, urging us to navigate the game mechanics strategically. Ontological engineering shows us reality can actually be reprogrammed, empowering us to shape culture. And finally, AI and blockchain show the economy becoming literal code, meaning we've got to adapt to tokenized structures. We're going to explore exactly how all of this works.
Section 3. Coding the mind, processing the simulation.
So let's look at psychoanalysis. According to the Lacanian view presented in the text, the simulation functions as the ultimate symbolic order. What does that actually mean? Well, it means our minds are already programmed. Long before we ever worried about computer simulations, our reality was being coded by language, by social norms, kinship structures, and societal expectations. Language is kind of the first simulator. Our psyche operates as this internal simulation engine, processing these rules. So the matrix isn't just external to us, it's the very structure of our desires and our interactions. Then we add deconstruction to the mix. The philosopher Jacques Derrida proposed the concept of difference, which essentially means that meaning is always deferred. It's really just a series of signs pointing to other signs. In a simulated reality, this becomes entirely literal. There is no transcendental signified, no ultimate base reality to uncover.
Searching for some original base reality is completely pointless because all we have, and frankly all we will ever have, is the interconnected code we're currently experiencing. The simulation isn't a copy of something real. Actually, it's just another text we're living inside.
Moving on to Section 4. Hacking the system's power, rules and rebellion.
This introduces the concept of the apolitics. Historically, we look to a centralized creator god for the rules of the universe. But in a simulation framework, we see this decentralized deterritorialization of theology. The traditional sky god gets replaced by something else, the simulator as a system administrator. And these administrators aren't necessarily moral beings. They just enforce the physics and the game mechanics of the universe. The economy, the laws of nature, these are the sovereign code now. Paying your bills is essentially a theopolitical act of obedience to the server's rules. Crazy to think about it that way, right?
Now, what's really interesting is how we can actually push back. The source introduces post-colonial neoculturation. The big idea here is that the default settings of our simulation, the laws, the economic systems, the cultural norms, are often inherently biased. They were coded by those in power. But if reality is just an engineered construct, then marginalized groups don't have to just sit there and accept the default code. They can use ontological engineering to identify those hard-coded biases and actively reprogram them, synthesizing entirely new identities and hybrid realities that actually serve them better.
Section 5. Our tokenized future, literalizing the simulation. Just look at the architecture of our emerging world right now. We are rapidly moving toward these frictionless techno-societies. In this future, artificial intelligence acts as the generative engine, kind of the unconscious of the system, just churning out reality and algorithms. Meanwhile, blockchain serves as the immutable ledger, strictly enforcing the rules. Everything from your emotional labor to your access to shelter is becoming tokenized. The nested capitalist reality becomes literal, automated code. The rules of the server are no longer just abstract concepts, they're hard-coded smart contracts. You can't escape them, which makes that pragmatic, who cares stance pretty much the only sane way to survive. You just have to learn to navigate the digital architecture.
Section 6. Engineering better realities. From NPCs to active creators. So, the crucial point here is laid out in 4 clear steps. First, you've got to accept phenomenological equivalence. Stop worrying if the world is fake and just focus on the consequences of your actions. Second, identify the hard-coded social and cultural biases in your environment. Realize they are just code, not absolute laws of nature. Third, start building alternative, frictionless hubs, communities and systems that operate on much better rules. And finally, engineer hybrid realities. Take the tools of the system, the technology, the language, and remix them to code a more humane, functional reality for yourself and your community. I really want to emphasize this visceral takeaway from the text. The simulation is not a cage, it is the medium. This entirely changes the paradigm. The simulation hypothesis isn't some bleak prison sentence meant to induce nihilism. It's actually incredibly empowering. It reveals that the world is constructed, which means it's a blank canvas. It's a medium for you to build upon, to create art, to forge communities, and to experience life fully.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought to carry with you. If the reality you experience is determined by how well you navigate and engineer the system around you, well, what kind of world are you going to code today? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and start building.